So how are you going to find out what's going on in your community? You're going to go to your community blog, and if you live in the Capitol Hill area, you're going to go to the Capitol Hill Seattle blog, and we've got Justin Carter from Capitol Hill Seattle right here on Community Blog TV. I'm Stan Emmert. Justin, welcome back.
Thanks.
As always, Capitol Hill has some of the most fun things happening in your area.
Of course.
By the way, I just wanted to make sure that everybody knows, go to it's just called CapitolHillSeattle.com, and that's the way that you can go to the blog itself. You can find out a lot of things, not only news, but also places to go, fun things to do, just all sorts of things, huh, Justin?
Yeah, we try and keep it busy and keep everybody informed.
Now, Justin, you're editor, publisher, ad sales guy, you're everything, right?
Yeah, basically handle it all. And we do have a self-serve advertising system that takes care of a lot of my work, but yeah, everything from making sure the news is there every day to making sure the local businesses have their ads served. That's my job.
Before we get into the news from the blog itself, what's been your biggest challenge over the past several years now that you've got the blog going strong?
Oh, it's definitely producing revenue from the work. I'm a bit of a natural at the news end of things. It's fascinating to me. I love it. I'm driven by it. I'm very amateur at ad sales. It's a really tough part of the business, and I don't think I'm that great at it, and I think a lot of people aren't. And so keeping a business based on advertising running with those kinds of challenges has been the biggest barrier by far. I'm amazed how well it works, and if it wasn't for all the great businesses on the Hill that were, I think, very open and excited about the opportunity, I wouldn't be here. So thanks a lot to all those guys.
Well, you certainly have made a splash here in the area because we were talking ahead of time. The World Affairs Council brought over a group of journalists from Eastern Europe, I think.
Yeah. It's interesting opportunities like that come along when you're an independent, especially right now when everyone's kind of studying what they call the hyper-local space. It's got a little bit of a buzzword in the media industry. But you learn quickly that the issues like ad revenue and those kinds of things really pale in comparison to the global issues around media and information when people are going to jail or facing violence because of what they write. That's when you realize ad sales is not that big of a deal.
So what did you learn from them, the Eastern European journalists, and what did they learn from you?
I think I learned from them an appreciation for the philosophy and the spirit of openness that is present both in the laws in the country and also just in people's kind of the way we think about how we live. I think from me, they, I hope, took away a message of we live in a good era to operate in. Kind of the new era of printing press is really accessible, and there's a lot you can do with just a little bit of resources.
All right, well, let's get to the news. There was a chlorine leak at the Volunteer Park Reservoir, and that's kind of a big deal, huh?
Well, it was a big deal. It could have been a big deal. That was an interesting story, I guess, because of the hazardous materials response is a massive fire response. So there were trucks everywhere. I always treat those stories as an opportunity to learn about things in the neighborhood. And in this situation, we learned that the reservoir is actually used for drinking water right now. For a while, it had only been kind of a backup, and now it's actually actively part of the city. The actual leak was not so serious, but we learned that we have a really important part of the city's infrastructure going on right in the middle of Capitol Hill, and so that was, I thought, pretty interesting.
Another story that I want to get to, it's talking about bicycling and the fact that Capitol Hill, well, the headline says, as the city considers a bike parking cuts, the study shows that the Hill lacks safe places to stow your ride. I thought that this was an interesting quote from someone at the Seattle Department of Transportation. It says, we don't yet know whether the cut will be accepted at a citywide level, but until we have certainty, we're not proceeding with any further bicycle rack work. We understand that this may be disappointing, but it was one of the many painful cuts SDOT was forced to offer. And I got to tell you, I've done some other things and had other guests with regard to Seattle City Services. The City of Seattle internal government seems to be very, very nervous right now.
As far as the budgetary environment, yeah, I think what you're seeing is cuts over the course of years, where they've been able to cut away what some people might call fat and processes that maybe weren't central. I think a lot of the anxiety that I'm hearing about now has to do with the fact that you've cut away the fat, quote unquote, and you're getting to bone.
Yeah.
You're starting to change things that we take for granted maybe in the city.
But isn't it kind of backward if on the one hand we are really emphasizing more and more bike traffic, more use of bicycles as a primary means of transportation, yet then we take away something that's essential, which is a place to put your bike?
Well, I mean, it's not really my job to analyze it. I often just deal with pieces. But I do try and take a pretty broad view of these things. I think if you look at individual circumstances like this, you might find some inconsistencies. If you look at city policy from directional standpoints, you're going to see more investment in things like bicycle infrastructure and pedestrian infrastructure than not, even if in this case it might seem a little ridiculous.
Another column, how you can make 12th Avenue a safer street. I thought this was very interesting because it's community driven. It said the 12th Avenue has been identified by our community and by the city as a street in need of safety improvements, and the purpose of our project will be to identify ways to make 12th Avenue safer for all modes of transportation and to work with the city to implement them. So who is this group? What do you think that they want to accomplish?
Yeah, this is a group from the Capitol Hill Community Council. They've formed a little committee to focus on a very specific problem, which is 12th Avenue past Madison, and specifically 12th Avenue east around John Street. Mm-hmm. It's a real tough area to cross as a pedestrian. It kind of winds a little bit, and so there's not great sight lines. And there's parking along it, and there's just lots of things around crossing it that can be dangerous. There's a decent amount of pedestrian accidents there over the years. What's cool about this story, though, is that the community group isn't just somebody complaining or coming up with hot, crazy ideas. They have a Department of Neighborhood grant that is accessible to them when they get matching volunteer hours that could, I think, be as much as $17,000, even $17,000 of infrastructure if they get enough volunteer hours where something could actually be built to physically change that street so it could be safer to cross.
Well, actually, and you had some commenters. You had more than what we're going to show, but let's go to the first comment. And the first one is, it says, my first thought is to do something like those flashing crosswalks on Lake City Way through the business district. They seem to be fairly effective, and that's not a bad idea.
Yeah, I mean, those kinds of things, they'll have a consultant involved. I think that will give them an idea of whether that kind of an idea can even happen there. And then, yeah, they'll move towards making that kind of thing a reality, and it could happen relatively quickly because the money is basically ready once they get the volunteer hours.
Another one is making the street, another comment that there was making the street narrower, mm-hmm. and so people will slow down because it's narrower. Wow. People who drive cars, and actually bicyclists, I would think neither one would like that very much.
Well, it's also the kind of idea that could be a challenge to do with $17,000. It might be a little outside the scope, I think, of what they're trying to accomplish. Mm-hmm.
I do want to go to the picture of 12th because 12th is, right there it is on the screen, Justin. It's it's a main thoroughfare, but there's more than just businesses that are located on 12th, huh?
Oh yeah, it's a residential area once you get past north of Cal Anderson Park. I think that yellow line is kind of funny because there's some good sections of curving road that weren't really quite represented there. So it's just it's not just a straight shot. You get kind of a meander, and I think that's the area where hopefully the most effort can be put toward. And there's also an area near the park where people are. It's a very pedestrian area and encouraged to walk a lot. A lot of safety features could come to bear there too and help.
Well, let's go on the thing that's probably the most commented about. It's Washington State Department of Transportation's other battle. The Hill Neighborhood Group is ready to fight against the 520 plan. And here's the quote from the article. Instead, the next big thing to finish the overhaul of 520 is finishing the plan for the miles of roadway between the shores of Lake Washington and I-5. Wow, nothing comes out like the roadway coming off Lake Washington, does it?
Yeah, this is an interesting transportation story for the city. There's the waterfront already with the Deep Board Tunnel. That's a debate. There's issues around a lot of different infrastructure around transportation, but the one around 520 in some ways is getting lost because it's complicated. They're replacing the floating part of the bridge, and they're doing a lot of work on the east side, but the west side, past the Arboretum into I-5, That is at a really early stage, and there's not even money specifically set aside for that project yet. So the debate's really early in being shaped, and there's a couple of community groups we wrote about, Sustainable 520, and the North Capitol Hill group that is involved with that, with Sustainable 520, are gearing up and saying that they're thinking about having to put up a real big fight, and maybe even a legal battle to change the state's plans.
Well, let's go to some of the comments because they really get into it, and the comments are great, actually. Here's one. I guess it's easy to raise objections and throw up roadblocks, but what is the group's specific alternative plan? And then he says, if there's truly a $2 billion shortage, we can build the 520 bridge lid ready. And then he also says this, finally about the noise, how many complaining residents purchased their homes before 520 was originally built? Because otherwise they purchased homes within earshot, and it's the same argument that you have around any kind of public works project like the airport as well. That particular comment wasn't incredibly popular.
Well, I mean, sometimes when comments are tough, especially if there's a side that has skin in the game, they can get some oppositional reaction, and I think that's what happened there. It's a
Which
tough
is great,
comment.
though.
Yeah, it's a good debate, and what I liked about this comment is even though it was not necessarily kind-spirited, it was a little mean, but it was it had logic in it, and there's something then that someone can react to. The worst kind are comments that are just mean and there's no logic to discuss, and that's why people resort to that kind of language a lot. But this is a good debate. It's not going to be solved in our comments, but some of the discussion will be shaped there.
Well, and actually, to me, this is the importance of the community blogs, particularly the Capitol Hill blog, because you are right in the middle of a difficult situation, enabling the public to have a voice.
Yeah, and it's a conversation that maybe would have happened in another environment in the past, but sometimes these are conversations that never would have happened, and so at least there's a chance for the sides to hear another viewpoint. I guess you could counter that, though, and say that maybe minds aren't really going to be changed by any of this, and it's just kind of a exercise in futility. But in the meantime, I'm informed by it, and I hope others are too.
Let's actually go to some more of the comments because they were really good and thoughtful. Here's one. I'd love the bridge rebuild if it were optimizing for more moving people, but it seems to be optimizing for moving cars. That brings into play the big argument that's going on right now between the car drivers and those who aren't car drivers, and I'm not sure that it's that simple, but
yeah, and this is the kind of comment that maybe focuses in on the car by whatever car no car war battle, but for a lot of the people talking about this part of 520, this is about their homes and the area where they live, and sounds and noise and living in the city and what the greater good versus private space. Those themes are, to me, more important and more unique to the Hill than the big questions on automobile infrastructure in the country.
Let's go to some more of the comments. We're going to try to finish these up before the break. It said, here's one person says, you're not understanding the point. You can't move next to a freeway or an airport and then complain about the noise. Interesting point. Let's go to the next one. The Seattle obstructionists are nothing but a highly financed bunch of NIMBY Montlake attorneys. And I've heard that one before. And then let's go. I think this is to the final one that may wrap it up. It says the issue is that this plan does not allow for mass transit options if not the best. It's not the best solution for the situation of moving people. And that may be the big thing. That was an excellent comment, I thought.
Yeah, the debate around transportation infrastructure and whether it should serve transit or automobiles is going to continue on. People in Montlake and North Capitol Hill have found themselves in the middle of it in some sense, and so hopefully we can at least help get their side out.
We got to take a break. We're very fortunate today on Community Blog TV to have Justin Carter with us. Justin is the editor, publisher, and everything for Capitol Hill Seattle. Go to the website, capitolhillseattle.com. It is the blog. It is the source of news. It is a source of where you find entertainment places. It is a great source for all sorts of things in the community of Capitol Hill. Even if you're not a Capitol Hill resident, you should go early and often to that blog because you can just find out so many places maybe you want to visit. Okay, Justin, there's a very interesting, if not tired, situation going on in Capitol Hill, and here's the article. The jury will hear the Broadway steps copyright lawsuit. What is this all about?
Capitol Hill has some great public art, and probably it's one of the most well-known series of pieces is what is called the Broadway Steps. They've been there, I think, since the late 70s, if I recall correctly. There is a case connected to a photographer that snapped a photo of the Broadway Steps and used it in his work, and it made it into a stock photo agency's online material. Was quickly removed, but in the meantime, the original artist who created the Broadway Steps has been very protective of his copyright, and contacted this photographer and said, hey, you violated my copyright. This has wound its way through the legal system and is now approaching a jury trial this summer, and has a lot of people up in arms. Public art becoming a copyright discussion and a fight is distasteful to some.
And as obvious as it may seem to some people, there are several sides to this. So let's actually go to the comments, because the comments present several sides. Mackie is the photography equivalent of a patent troll. In no possible circumstance has Mackie lost $60,000 for the micro stock images that depict a portion of the Capitol steps. Mackie is the original guy, I take it?
He's the original artist, and he's defended his copyright in the past in some similar cases, so it's not the first time this has come up for the work.
Let's go to the next comments, though, because there are suggestions coming from the group on Capitol Hill. Hey, well, for one of them, why has this dragged on so long? If public art embedded in a public sidewalk, it's ridiculous that this wasn't thrown out years ago, and Mackie's not a hero for artists and their rights. So that's definitely another strong opinion. Let's go to the next quote, though. This is an idea for the next Capitol Hill Seattle meetup. How about a get-together, dig those steps up, and then throw them into a big light rail pit, someone else says, or shove them up Mackie's troll hole. That's pretty interesting, I think.
Yeah, it's always helpful CHS comment crowd. But there is an argument to be made that these are a public nuisance in a sense, because they're just waiting for the next copyright lawsuit to come along, the photographer to snap the photos again. And does Capitol Hill want to keep going through this and kind of aiding and abetting this kind of legal action? It would be a shame to lose that public art, but I can't always come up with an argument against their removal.
Yeah, and the final comment on this pretty much kind of says something like that. It says that if you don't defend your copyright now, when do you begin after Hallmark makes a line of cards bearing your copyrighted work, which you haven't defended and therefore has fallen into public domain?
Yeah, I mean, there is an argument to be made for the artist also in this situation.
Okay, now we got to get to crime.
Crime.
The Volunteer Park area burglary update. SPD is looking for a suspicious white van. I remember the day that I was watching a white van and with OJ in it, but that's been a while.
It's a different white van, I hope.
Yeah, let's do it. Isn't OJ in jail?
Who knows? I'll have to check the records.
So, I mean, is this, first off, how did you find out about this, if you can reveal your source?
Sure. I mean, this is a combination of tips from people in the public, but also digging through jail records and talking to the Seattle Police Department. Putting all three kind of fuzzy bits of information together, you start to get a sense of what the facts are and what's real and what's actually happening in the neighborhood.
And something like this story, which is important to the people at a hyper-local area, can only be found on a community blog, I think.
I think so. It's the kind of reporting that's pretty difficult for a citywide newspaper to make space for and to scale down to. They'll do it sometimes, but it's kind of in a sensational way, like, oh my gosh, this crazy thing happened. This is just really a day-to-day crime kind of story that happens to really impact a specific neighborhood.
Well, let me ask you this. Did you sensationalize this story? And here it is. The Harvard Exit Theater was cleared during a SIFF screening of the Earth Liberation Front movie. And here's the update. The man's behavior coupled with the subject matter in the film was enough to prompt staff to the Seattle gay scene. Well, basically it was enough to prompt staff to call SPD and request assistance with checking the theater in case the man had left anything dangerous behind. Okay, now let's go to the Seattle gay scene, because they said they shared one eyewitness's hypothesis that this was bugging the man. It was a date gone bad.
Yeah, and since we've had that hypothesis corroborated by another person who said they were there. Now, who knows? I mean, commenters can sometimes play games, but I'll buy this hypothesis. Sensationalize this one, sometimes they write themselves. I mean, you've got a SIFF movie, you've got Capitol Hill, You've got people getting ready to sit down and watch a documentary about the Earth Liberation Front. And you have an agitated man wearing a camo jacket who suddenly storms out and spooks staff.
Well, let's see what the commenters had to say about this, because they weighed in on this story. One says there were a minimum of 5 patrol cars hanging around when I walked by about 7:30. I guess this explains the unusual amount of people milling aimlessly around about Deluxe. And then someone else says, well, Wednesday night is Burgerama, and the Deluxe burgers are $4.99. So that was very interesting. Next comment. And one guy runs into the theater and runs back out, and suddenly it's some kind of bomb scare. Maybe he just had to pee. How paranoid are we now? And then someone responded saying these days we're cautious and maybe overly cautious in the case of a crowded movie theater. Better safe than sorry. But finally, I think this final comment here, let's go to it. If every white guy wearing a camo jacket and a backpack and exhibiting peculiar behavior in Capitol Hill is going to be viewed as a potential terrorist, we might as well set up a checkpoint at Pike and Boren.
It's true, but sometimes it's our job just to report. And there was a lot of activity there. We wanted to find out what had happened.
Speaking of criminal, this next story, putting up a picture of this is criminal. It's the confectional and its mini cheesecakes go big on North Broadway. Whoa.
Criminal for the photo, though. I had to sit there and taste a lot of those.
Oh,
so they kept
that's
bringing them
tough.
out, and then there were shots of their drinking chocolate. It was a tough assignment.
Let's actually go to those pictures because this is small business, and the importance of the small businesses to a community is huge, right?
Oh, it's incredibly important. It's our lifeblood. It's an independent business. It's creating more jobs, and it's also putting a working bakery right in the middle of Capitol Hill. There's a lot of cool things about this story, in addition to the fact that you can go get a sweet treat now on North Broadway.
And let's go to something else, the Capitol Hill Seattle question and answer. She created Capitol Hill's Cure on the edge of Cal Anderson Park. And what is this? This is real interesting, and then we're going to get to a couple of questions inside of it, too.
Here's a new bar on the edge of the park that's almost like if you just have like a permanent picnic spot. They're going to have great meats and cheeses and beers and wines, and it's a cool little place on the backside of the new Broadway building, making Nagle Place into a much more interesting space, not just for cars parking anymore. I think it's a pretty nice addition to the neighborhood.
Actually, let's go to the first of the questions, because it relates to something very, very important, and it is, what ailments have your Remedium cocktail with, is that Lily Blanc, Gin, Absolute Mandarin, and Prosecco? I don't even know how to pronounce that. Remedied so far. And the answer is melancholy inhibition. We have a Latin slogan, Vinum Remedium Est, which means wine is the cure. Not a bad thing to get to write about, huh, Justin?
It's also cool when you get a chance to have the voice of the business owners and you find out that they're humans and they have wit and they have funny things to say too. So.
Well, and also a very important other product. Let's go to that one too, because that's really very good as well. And it's having only one sandwich on your menu and calling it the sandwich suggests such finality. Are there more sandwiches in the Cure's future? What a great answer this is. Maybe, but we're pretty committed to the sandwich because it's awesome. It's like a grown-up bologna sandwich. It has a thin slice of mortadella and pecorino, and I'm not sure, mustard and mayonnaise. I've eaten one about every day for the past 2 weeks.
It's, I guess, one of the byproducts of running a cool local business is getting to sample your goods all the time. I don't know how they do it. If I was around that kind of great stuff all the time, I would have a much different body shape, I'm sure.
Do you think that because you cover a lot of small businesses in the community, do they employ the local people?
Oh, totally. I mean, employees especially tend to be on the Hill. What you find more often than not, though, a lot of our business owners actually don't live on the Hill. They live around the city or even outside of the city. And to me, that's always very interesting. They pick the Hill because of the appeal, and it's the kind of place that they'd like to live, but often they don't. So it's an interesting kind of introduction for me because they haven't seen the site before, and aren't as in tune with the news and the culture around it. And so in some ways, that's a nice thing to also serve from CapitolHillSeattle.com's perspective, is helping these people keep track of what's going on in the neighborhoods that they're running their businesses in.
Another example of something that with a community blog that you can do and should do, and I'm glad that you do it, is a story like this one. Lather Daddy rises as a 12th Avenue laundromat gets an overhaul.
Sure, it can't all be cheesecake and beer, right? So, I mean, you gotta get
Gotta
your
wash
laundry
your
done,
clothes.
right? And it's cool to have somebody actually put a little bit of muscle into fixing up a laundromat.
Well, and there's this. Owner Tina McManus tells Capitol Hill Seattle that the overhaul of the laundromat at 1807 12th is still in progress. A fresh coat of paint is done next. Music, cable TV, and hey nerd, wireless internet. You know, years ago, I mean, I'm thinking 5 years ago, you would never think about wireless internet, but now it can be almost pleasant to go do your laundry.
It definitely depends on the kind of business space you want to create, though. I have talked to a few people that are doing businesses on the Hill that lately have always had wireless, and they're starting to think about not incorporating it in their space. Example would be the Confectional, the new cheesecake place. No wireless there because they really do want to keep flow moving, and they don't want people just hanging around looking at CapitolHillSeattle.com all day.
We got a couple of important stories we have to get to. The Capitol Hill Seattle picks. Thanks to voting early and often, the next Capitol Hill Park wins $10,000 of support. This is great, and the words were, when the votes had been tallied, a project to help fund the redevelopment of FedRep Park squeezed out a narrow victory over improvements at the Summit Slope P-Patch.
Yeah, we have a new park space coming to the Hill at Federal and Republican. There's no money to develop it, though, from the city standpoint. They bought it, but they can't pay to develop it, so it's going to have to be a community-driven thing. This group was able to win a contest from the new local bank where they'll have some extra money to help make that happen now.
That's the Umpqua
Umpqua on Broadway.
All right, next story. Again, picks. A civic-minded Saturday on Capitol Hill. You always have to promote people who do this kind of work. Fantastic for them. Powered by bagels from El Tana and stylish orange safety vests from the City of Seattle, the volunteers set about picking up trash along 12th Avenue. This is a story because people did give up their Saturday to go help the neighborhood.
Definitely, and we like to kind of embrace and extend that kind of thing and make it so it happened and everybody sees it. Maybe next year someone else who saw this will think that they should volunteer, or they'll think of other things that they can do. Those are the best kinds of inspirations to bring to your community, and we're happy to be able to share those kinds of pictures and those kinds of stories.
Speaking of inspirational, congratulations to Capitol Hill Seattle, because you guys came up in third place in some awards.
Yeah, we won for the Society of Professional Journalists Western Division. It makes it sound like sports or something like that. I think they have a different name for it. But basically, it's Alaska, Idaho, Montana. We came in third in their hyperlocal awards.
Speaking of sports, there you are. Let's go to let's blow this up. There they are. Right there on the scoreboard, Capitol Hill Seattle blog, and they didn't even have it done completely right.
You should have heard the way they cheered when that went up there too.
So we just have a few seconds left. What do you think is next for the next month in Capitol Hill?
Well, funny enough, as much development as we have coming this summer, we have a ton of projects that are going to be underway this summer, digging everywhere. I've just found out about yet another one in the heart of Pike Pine that will be starting up, and so we'll be writing about that after the holiday. And there's a bunch of new restaurants that are due. Terra Plata will come into the Melrose Market this summer.
All right,
so
well,
it's really busy time.
a month from now, it'll be Capitol Hill Seattle on Community Blog TV once again. Justin, thank you very much for being with the show. Again, go to CapitolHillSeattle.com, learn an awful lot about the neighborhood and an awful lot more about places to go, have fun, and just enjoy. We'll see you right here next week on Community Blog TV. Take care.